Bonus tip for Lich King, if you're a hunter or a warlock, you can actually drop the defile off the entire platform. Watch what happens right here. If you get the defile, you can even make it fall off so no one ever has to deal with it. What's up guys, my name is Sarthe, and today I'm gonna give you some tips for every single boss in Icecrown Citadel to defeat them on the heroic difficulty to make them just a little bit easier. Some of these are crazy cheesy tips that make things a lot easier, and some of them are just how you should just focus on dealing with the encounters, especially ones like Lord Marrowgar. That's very easy so that you can deal with it quickly and move on with your raid night. With that being said, I'm working on a ton more guides for this raid, so of course, if you like to stay updated with everything, always follow the channel. From Lord Marrowgar, your deaths are either coming probably from people standing in flames or from taking too much damage during the Bone Storm. If it's the flames, all I have to say is just open your eyes or get an add-on like GTFO that yells at you when you're standing in the flames, but it's really easy to dodge this. As for Bone Storm, the actual boss does more damage when you're closer to the center of him. You see that red little circle at the very bottom? I'm running in directly into him, but his hitbox is ginormous. You do not need to move very close into the actual boss himself, and the closer you are, you take more damage. Everyone in the raid will take damage, but it's just so simple to not be directly inside of him. So if he's bone storming over here, instead of just running all the way into him, just stay at a larger range. Or if you can actually, and you're trying to do this really easily, then just focus on killing any of the bone spikes. You don't need to pump extra DPS here. Also, during the Bone Storm, you can have your tanks and hunters stand on two different sides of the room, so Lord Marrowgar will choose most likely the furthest person away from him and just move back and forth accordingly, which will be very easy for you, and then you can just reset him up. For Lady Deathwhisper, you never actually need to deal with the tanking mechanic in phase 2. You can actually have a blood DK with full frost resistance gear, just face tank every single attack from the boss. And the way they do this is that they position the boss once and then nobody ever interrupts the actual frost bolts. So the frost bolts fully get cast each and every time. The DK will pretty much never get hit from the boss. You can see my tank standing right here, and he can just permanently hit it with Icy Touch for a ridiculous amount of threat. This means you will never lose threat during this phase, and the only thing to deal with is going to be making sure that you dodge any of those spirits. They are very easy to dodge. Just move away from them and bring in any of the adds on top of the boss, which is again never moving, so that you can just down everything. Lootship is a joke. It's the easiest fight there is, but the only thing we could do to make it better is to make sure that we actually defeat it faster. And the only way to do that is to have the sorcerer on the opposite ship never actually cast Deep Freeze or whatever its spell is to even knock anybody out of the turrets. This will make the fight go significantly quicker, and the only way to do this is to actually use a rogue's distract. You'll see me doing it right here. Distract before the cast goes off, and the sorcerer will just stand here for 10 seconds. If my team got over here, but this was a GDKP, then this boss or this mob would be dead already. Now I'm gonna show myself do it again in slow motion. As the mob is moving into place, you can hit him with the distract. I don't have a tank here, so you'll notice that I just evasion so I don't get killed by the mob, but it doesn't even matter if this is the first hit. As long as the sorcerer isn't in position, you'll see right here, then you can even distract. It literally doesn't matter if other people are here first. It doesn't need to be out of combat. It doesn't register as combat until it is casting. So distract will always work to do this. Your ship will never get frozen, and it's just an easy way to down this boss a little faster. For Deathbringer Saurfang, the thing that really gets you is later on when he's got 4 or 5 marks out on players and you have someone with the marks die, and then the boss just gets healed. Well, the easiest way to deal with this is on the 4th or 5th or both of those marks, just use a Paladin's Divine Intervention. That's right, DI, sacrifice the Paladin, have him die, and the other player is just out of the fight entirely. Do not cancel aura that DI, do not click it off, but you can actually use a Soul Stone or a Battle Res to get the Paladin back in the fight. This is so incredibly simple, and it can absolutely save your raid, making this fight a lot easier. Of course, you want to make sure you use knockbacks as often as possible, slows as often as possible, and as you're probably watching, my little cursor you see will scroll over the blood beast. If you are a melee DPS, you can actually taunt one of the blood beasts, which happened right there. You can taunt these right before they reach the ranged. Now, if you taunt them, then make sure it doesn't actually reach you either, but if you do this, it can save your ranged, and the blood beast adding to his runic power generation is one of the other things that can wipe the raid. Rotface is the second easiest boss in in this raid. And the only way you should be dying to this is most likely gonna be from the slime spray. So make sure you watch out for the slime spray. If you are gonna be in front of it, do not be stacked up with anybody, and make sure you're using something like a health potion. Also, if you get the very first infection, there's nothing you can do to run it out, so just stay in on melee or whatever, it will be chasing you. It's not a tauntable mob if it is the little ooze, it'll just chase you forever. But once you see the second little ooze, then you want to run it out to your off tank. But the way you run this out is always go in between the big ooze or little ooze and the off tank that's kiting them around. That will just perfectly place it as soon as it spawns to just get sucked up, and you'll never have to deal with it again. Also, if you are having issues with the explosion, all you need to do is have the tank move into a new position right as the mob explodes. Not as it's casting the explosion, but the second the explosion cast is finished, then you just follow the tank. If you're a melee or anybody else, just move into a position where nobody else was standing. But if the tank is coordinating this well, then nobody else ever has to even think about it. Follow the boss, dodge the explosion, second easiest fight in here. Festergut is a step up from Rotface, and that is mostly because of his tank buster mechanics. What you want to do though, if you are melee, is actually stay stacked all together on the butt of the boss, usually on one of the legs. I would always suggest going from the right leg to the left leg and the right leg into that back to the left leg. Do this every single time, and if you're moving all together on every single goo explosion, then you'll never get hit by it. One of the things that is going to mess up the raid is if the healers have to stop healing the tanks. You need to always have tank CDs rolling or defensive CDs with the healing, so all of their focus is to make sure that it doesn't absolutely womp the tanks. So every time a goo spawns, just move to the next leg. You'll never really have to think about it, and no one's ever gonna have to worry about it. There's a few cheesy things you can do with Professor Putricide. The first one is to make sure that you buff up the actual abomination. The abomination does a ridiculous amount of damage, and you need this person to sit here and be pumping. So make sure you buff up the A-bomb and tank the boss near one of the green oozes as often as possible. So the A-bomb can just pump out deeps here. I'm gonna show you in a couple seconds as our A-bomb tank, who is True G, is now at 16k DPS. We've seen him at 24k DPS on this encounter. You can also use Hysteria on this thing. Anything you need to do to have him pumping. This was the unfortunate thing that happened in the Race World First, where a Valkyrie actually spawned and came into the room while we were fighting Professor Putricide instead of dealing with, I don't know, the Valkyrie wasn't in the middle of the Lich King's area, whatever. The next thing that you want to focus on is that before these oozes spawn, you can actually dot both of them. Specifically, this is looking to be classes like Warlocks and Shadow Priests that can get really strong dots, but they actually do a cast. You'll notice it right here, the green swap cast. And this is just for my weak aura, but you should see the cast bar right under here. This cast makes them immune. So you see that I have the orange debuff. As a melee, for one, I'm soaking here, as well as you should have pets soak here. But the second thing is I can get my dots up right now and then swap to the orange. These will be full damage dots on the opposite target. And then you go and attack the correct target that you're supposed to be attacking, and you can just pump it. You'll do so much extra damage, and it makes the fight a little bit easier. But again, making sure the abomination is doing its damage is going to be the biggest DPS gain for your raid as a whole. The next thing you do want to worry about is these explosions. They can kill you. Well, you can actually cheese these with things like pets, summons, anything like that, Army of the Dead. You can use anything you need to actually absorb this AoE explosion from the green ooze. So if things are getting a little dicey, make sure you are bringing in anything or using army, maybe summoning target dummies, anything else you need. But always make sure that pets are attacking that green ooze. It'll make this fight a lot easier. For Blood Prince Council, this is probably gonna be the hardest fight for most pugs to deal with outside of the Lich King himself. Professor Putricide is really rough, but really this fight is all about pure coordination. Obviously, if you have a pet that has something like Cleave, looking at you, Demo Warlocks, make sure you turn that off. Second thing, if you do have assigned positions for the Empowered Shock Vortex, like you are the close person, not supposed to get very far away, make sure you stop. You see how I did not get knocked? Somebody was a little closer and knocked that player, but make sure you stop and are getting to a good position, because usually in a lot of groups, everybody will just keep running in the direction they're supposed to go. This is not helpful. If you are assigned to stay a little bit closer, just move a few steps away from the tank and then stop. The next thing you want to focus for is that in heroic mode you're getting this debuff. You see this debuff that's stacking on me? Well, it's actually on server ticks. This applies on server tick. So what that means is you can continue moving even if you have high stacks. I have 9 stacks right now. Instead of just standing still to let it drop off, you could continue moving if you're stuck in a far position. What you need to do is just make sure you are tracking server ticks like I have on that weak aura and move in between it actually getting to the higher point. So if I move right now and then stop, move, stop, then I would never gain more stacks. And this can be really good if you need to reposition. And just call out the shock vortexes, because if it's in melee or if it's in ranged, is really necessary to call out so that you don't screw yourselves. For Blood Queen, just make sure you delay the first bite. After you get bitten, the first person, which as you're seeing is our feral druid in this situation, his next bite is going to be for us on a hunter, but that should be delayed by 6 to 8 seconds. Now, why is that? It's because the third one that will go out, where both of these players are biting to make it so that 4 people are vampires, it's going to happen on the Incite Terror. This is going to happen while Blood Queen is in the air phase. You don't want that. A ton of raid-wide damage happens right now, and if you hit them with the bite during this, then you'll probably one-shot someone, because as you bite them, you may have noticed it does a ton of damage. Now, there's ways to actually cheese this. You can bop the player that's getting bitten. They will not take any damage. You can also use Ice Block on that player, and they will again not take any damage. Also, the next thing you want to focus on is just don't greed extra damage, especially if you're melee during the air phase. Use whatever you can to mitigate any sort of raid-wide damage. You see that I use AMS here, and I just run to the corner. Don't try to stay in position and get extra death coils off. It's not worth it if you're trying to down this boss. It is worth it if you're trying to cheese a little bit extra DPS, but early phases and while we're getting through smoothing out this raid, just focus on delaying the bites and then focus on keeping everybody safe. Also, you can AMS or vanish these swarming shadows. If you see the boss targeting you to drop these swarming shadows, then all you need to do is click your AMS at that point and you will never get the application. It's the same thing as Jiraxis, so you'll never have to move out to drop fires anywhere. Velythria Dreamwalker absolutely has a cheese. There's actually a few cheeses, but the biggest one is using your hunter pet with Blood of the Rhino. So you need a tenacity pet for your hunter and have the hunter place the pet inside of the boss. Let me try to get a better position for you guys. So the hunter's pet will be directly inside of the boss. Then all of your paladins are going to cast their beacon of light on the boss and start casting holy lights directly on that hunter pet. Now, if you just want a reference, look at the healing done in our kill. 25,000 HPS by Holy Palace Sway. And who's he healing? Oh, he's healing the pet the entire time, casting Holy Light over and over and over again on the pet. That splash heal, because of Blood of the Rhino, which is increasing your pet stamina by 4%, but also increasing all of the healing effects done on this pet by 40%, does actually relay back onto Velythria. So getting all of these splash heals from this is going to pump into Velythria, which is going to just make the fight a lot easier for you. So I highly suggest getting something like a bear pet or any sort of tenacity pet, and then making sure that it is talented into Blood of the Rhino. Then just position the pet in the middle of the boss, click stay, and that's all you need to do. From there, you can actually delay killing any of the gluttonous A-bombs until you deal with a blazing skeleton. Every time you get an A-bomb spawn, you can get it a little bit low, but just focus on waiting until you get another blazing skeleton, because it'll actually delay spawns later. So this makes the fight a lot easier for you if you have issues with any of the ads. Just delay killing the A-bomb, focus on anything else, and then once you actually down the A-bomb or you're about to get the next A-bomb, you can get that and it'll instantly pretty much spawn some of the suppressors. For Sindragosa, make sure your tank has frost resistance gear. It makes it so much easier, especially if you're just pretty much having one person tank 90% of the fight. Also, switch to resistance flask at 35%. When you get into phase 2, just switch to resistance flask. It's worth it. Trust me, it's worth it. It makes the fight a lot easier. Have everyone in your raid do this. The next thing you're going to want to do and focus on is during phase 2, Obviously, if you get 2 ice tombs, just make sure you break them. But during phase 2, you're only going to drop your stacks on every other ice tomb. You're seeing one's gonna spawn right here. I will move over. Now I have 5 stacks. It's not great. It's kind of a lot of damage, but it's totally fine. You're gonna defeat this ice tomb and then get back on the boss. Instead of the next ice tomb during this phase and going and dropping your stacks again, you're gonna wait until another one is over here on the right. So every second one of these is where you will drop your stacks. Do not worry about dropping your stacks every single time. You can do it if it is helping your raid take less damage, but it actually is a little bit scarier to have the fight last longer during this phase and take a tiny bit more damage. If you have any sort of mitigation, especially if you're a Death Knight or a Feral Druid. Oh, and just if you're a caster during phase 2, if you get Unchained Magic, you pretty much just AFK. Sorry. That's like, it's super lame. That's the fight. For the Lich King, the Valkyrie phase is probably the most intimidating. And if you're doing it on heroic, what you need to do is stun the Valkyries. You want them all to go in one single direction. You want to hope to only have to deal with 1 or 2 or less Valkyries. But if you get all 3 of them, there's one cheesy thing you can do that actually has a stun off all GCDs. What are you thinking, Infernal? Yes, Infernal is one of those, but Infernal should be kind of the last ditch effort. If things get a little scary, if the Valkyries are gonna make it all the way to the edge and fall off, then you can use your Infernals. But on top of that, you can use Earthshaker. Yes, that's right. Earthshaker from literal Molten Core has a knockdown that will knock down all of the mobs around you. Put this on your Retribution Paladin, and this can save lives. If you have all 3 people getting picked up, grab an Earthshaker on all of your rets, and this thing is nuts. Now, if you do get a proc, I would swap it off because you're not going to get a lot more procs. This thing is great when it does proc, but just swap off of it because just for real, it's not going to proc again. Its PPM is pretty low. Past that, like I showed earlier, hunters can make it back onto the platform very easily. You can see Warlock happen right there, and as a hunter, I will knock back onto the platform. Hunters and Warlocks and Rogues even can make it back onto the platform super easily if they get picked up. If it is a Rogue and they're going to use Killing Spree to get back, only combat rogues, make sure you don't slow the actual Valkyr. They will get dropped and then use Killing Spree, and it'll bring them back onto the platform. Mages can also blink back to the platform, and warriors as well as feral druids. If the boss is in their line of sight perfectly, they should be able to charge. It is kind of sketchy. It's not very trustworthy. So the ones you really want to trust are always going to be hunters and warlocks. And for hunters, like you'll notice what happens to me in a second when I get gripped, you need to make sure you're putting an input that actually makes your character face away from the boss. So what I'm doing is just holding down my mouse buttons to make sure that I'm facing away from the boss, because when you get dropped, your character is turned around. For reference, this is what's going to happen if you don't do this. You'll see right here, and he'll just get yeet. Oh, nope, not turned around. So don't do this, guys. You don't want to obviously do this. And there it is, guys. Those are tips for every single boss encounter in here. Hopefully this is what you should focus on, and hopefully this will help you get every single boss down. Thanks for watching, guys. My name is Sarthe. As always, if you like this, of course, make sure to help out the channel by liking and subscribing. But of course, I will also have a ton more guides for you soon. Anyways, guys, good luck in ICC. Hope you all get all the loot you want, and I'll see you all on the next one.